Gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentlelady from Georgia, Ms. Greene.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a unifying belief of the left, a hatred of America and Western civilization. Anti-Israel extremism is frequently part of a broader anti-Western sentiment. It's why so many of the protesters at the LA anti-ICE riots are flying Palestinian flags while burning the American flag, and why Isra Hirsi, the daughter of a congresswoman who sits on foreign affairs, Ilhan Omar, said on her Instagram last week, "From LA to Rafah, there is one common oppressor, death to the colonial empire." She also drew this connection between ICE enforcement in LA and Israel's war against Hamas. For the left, everything can be reduced to white people oppressing brown people. Whether it be a BLM riot, a pro-Palestinian encampment, or an attempt to impede ICE from enforcing federal immigration laws, these protests are all organized by the same professional left-wing activists whose intent is to cause as much civil unrest and chaos as possible. Elias Rodriguez, the man who shot and killed 2 Israeli embassy officials last month, was deeply involved in this far-left activist ecosystem. Mr. Carafano, what far-left groups was Elias Rodriguez involved with?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm American Interest, and this is where we break down political events and news without partisan noise, without yelling, just with facts, reason, and clear analysis so you can form your own opinion. Today, we're going to react to a recent congressional hearing clip featuring Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, in which she delivers strong accusations against left-wing activism in America. The video connects recent protests, pro-Palestinian movements, anti-ICE demonstrations, and even violent incidents to what Greene describes as an orchestrated far-left agenda allegedly supported by Chinese influence and so-called dark money.
So you raise a really important point, which is why that the threat of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism in the United States is a bigger and broader problem. Because when we look at the organizations which have supported and encouraged or discussed these—
I'm short on time, Mr. Carafano. Yeah. What organizations?
So this is the Party of Socialism and Liberation.
Great.
Which has also been engaged in activities like BLM and other riots as well.
Now, would that be linked to Neville Roy Singham? Does that name ring a bell?
He is widely recognized as a major funder of the organization, and that's from Wikipedia, so.
Right, and just to go further on who Neville Roy Singham is, he's the son of a Sri Lankan immigrant and Cuban immigrant, but in 1974, he was investigated by the FBI for his ties to groups engaged against the United States interest. He was a member of a Maoist group. He's also said to be nearly a billionaire and gives his money frequently to left-wing organizations. He's even linked to the CCP. He currently lives and works in Shanghai. He shares office space with a Chinese propaganda firm focused on presenting a positive image of China to the global South. And in 2019, he started a consulting business with Chinese partners active in the propaganda apparatus of the CCP. He has provided significant funding to pro-China media outlets around the world, and he even married Jody Evans, the founder of Code Pink, in 2017. She used to be against China, but she's not anymore, and she's currently co-authoring a book titled "China is Not Our Enemy." You know what's really interesting about this man is he uses the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Fund. There's a lot of Americans invest their money with Goldman Sachs, but the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Fund is a dark money clearinghouse to obscure his identity, Singham's identity, while facilitating the transfer of substantial sums to nonprofit. Things like the People's Forum, which received over $20 million from Singham through the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Fund, organized anti-Israel protests across the country, and was heavily involved in the protests at Columbia and the takeover of Hamilton Mall. Singham also funds $20 million through the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Group to the Justice and Education Fund, which provides money to pro-China media outlets around the world. And, just as you mentioned, the Party of Socialism and Liberation. That's the group that's organizing these lovely events happening in LA that Democrats call mostly peaceful, but the people in LA call fiery, violent, and call a war against America. He also funded, and unbelievably, the pro-Palestinian protests around the country and on campuses, and Elias Rodriguez, the man who killed the 2 young Israeli diplomats. Singham coordinated the anti-ICE LA protest. Again, this picture just can't be shown enough. And they have been coordinating these anti-ICE protests around the world, around the country. And more to come is what the Democrats tell us. Mr. Carafano, one last question. Do you believe China is funding the war against America?
There's a lot of activity in the public record that show Chinese money is flowing into many of these organizations which have been involved in planning and organizing and supporting these activities. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Carafano. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Now, whether you agree with Greene or not, this is a significant moment in the broader national conversation about protest movements, global politics, and media narratives. So let's walk through the claims piece by piece, and I'll give you my neutral analysis of what's grounded in fact, what's debatable, and what's speculation. Greene starts with a sweeping statement that the political left harbors a unified hatred for America and Western civilization. Now, as a neutral analyst, I can tell you that this framing is very broad. It's one thing to point out that certain left-leaning activist groups have been critical of U.S. foreign policy, capitalism, or historical injustices. But does that amount to hatred of America or Western civilization as a whole? Not necessarily. Many progressives argue that their criticism is aimed at making America live up to its ideals: freedom, equality, justice. Others, especially in radical spaces, may indeed use language that sounds anti-Western. But lumping all of the left together is oversimplified, and frankly, unhelpful if we want nuanced understanding. Greene draws a connection between protests in Los Angeles, including anti-IC demonstrations and Palestinian activism. She highlights that some demonstrators carried Palestinian flags and burned American flags. Is that true? Yes, footage and reports from those protests do show Palestinian solidarity imagery. The connection between Palestinian advocacy and critiques of U.S. immigration enforcement is rooted in what activists often call global struggles against oppression. That framing may sound radical, but it's common rhetoric on the far left globally. Does that mean that everyone protesting IC is anti-American or anti-Israel? No. Protests are rarely monolithic and often include people with very different agendas, sometimes conflicting ones. Next, Greene mentions a post by Representative Ilhan Omar's daughter, drawing connections between Israel's war in Gaza and U.S. immigration policy. Now, fair criticism here. That is a highly controversial statement. But remember, this was her daughter, not Ilhan Omar herself. Using that to discredit an entire political side may be more of a guilt by association tactic than a substantive policy critique. One of Greene's strongest points was raised in the case of Elias Rodriguez, the man accused of killing 2 Israeli embassy officials. If that individual had real connections to radical activist groups, that's worth serious scrutiny by law enforcement and policymakers. But as of now, the full details of his affiliations are not widely confirmed, and we should be careful not to generalize from one person's alleged crimes to whole social movements without evidence. Greene names the Party for Socialism and Liberation, PSL, as a key group involved in these demonstrations. And yes, the PSL is a real Marxist-Leninist party, and they have organized many pro-Palestinian and anti-capitalist demonstrations. That's not conspiracy, that's factual. But again, are all these movements coordinated by the PSL alone? Likely not. Protest movements often bring together coalitions of different groups, from student to anarchist to union members to religious organizations. Simplifying it to one radical party misses that complexity. /segment 6, Neville Roy Singham, billionaire funding allegations. Now, here's where conspiracy level goes up. Greene accuses Neville Roy Singham, a leftist billionaire, of funneling money to radical causes using dark money to the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Fund. Is Singham real? Yes. Is he involved in funding far-left causes? Yes. Even the New York Times and the Intercept Asterisk have reported on his financial influence in pro-China media and radical activism. But is that necessarily a war on America? That's a subjective call. People fund causes all the time. Right-wing billionaires fund conservative media. Libertarian think tanks, religious groups, and left-wing billionaires fund progressive causes. Welcome to politics. Whether that's sinister depends on your perspective. This is a sensitive topic. Greene argues that Singham is effectively part of China's propaganda machine, working with organizations in Shanghai and promoting pro-CCP messaging globally. Is there evidence of pro-China influence campaigns globally? Absolutely. The CCP does engage in information campaigns through media outlets and academic ties. However, linking all pro-Palestinian activism or all anti-IC protests to Chinese state control is a big leap. The reality is far more complex, and not all criticism of U.S. policy equals Chinese propaganda. Greene's point about the Goldman Sachs Philanthropy Fund being used to hide the identities of donors is credible. That's the nature of donor-advised funds. But these funds are used by people across the political spectrum, not just left-wing billionaires. So yes, opaque financial structures should be scrutinized by everyone across the aisle. Finally, Greene implies that China is behind a broader war against America via funding left-wing protests. As a neutral analyst, that's plausible in small ways, but unproven at scale. The idea that the Chinese Communist Party is bankrolling campus protests across the U.S. stretches current evidence. Could individual groups or outlets have connections? Possibly. Is it all an orchestrated CCP plot? No firm proof yet. So what's the takeaway here? There are radical groups in the U.S. with anti-capitalist, anti-American foreign policy views. Some of them do get support from wealthy donors, including Neville Roy Singham. There are real concerns about foreign influence in U.S. discourse, including from China. But sweeping generalizations that all left-wing activism is foreign-controlled, or that all leftists hate America, are oversimplified and polarizing. And polarizing narratives often lead to more heat, less light. As always, scrutinize everything. Demand evidence. Follow the money, but also stay clear-eyed and don't fall for sensationalism from either political side. That's why I'm here to help you cut through it all. If you found this analysis helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's build a community where we debate issues with reason, not just with slogans. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.